I'm a neuroscientist and professor in the University of California. And over the past, 35 years, I study behavior, but on the basis of everything from genes through neurotransmitters, dopamine, things like that, all the way through circuit analysis. So that's what I normally do. But then, for some reason, I got into something else just recently. And it all grew out of one of my colleagues asking me to analyze a bunch of brains of psychopathic killers. And so this would be the typical talk I would give. And the question is, how do you end up with a psychopathic killer? What I mean by psychopathic killer are these people, these types of people. And so some of the brains that I've studied are people you know about. When I get the brains, I don't know what I'm looking at. It's a blind experiment. They give me normal people and everything. So I've looked at about 70 of these and came up and saw a number of pieces of data. So we look at these sorts of things theoretically on the basis of genetics and brain damage and the interaction with environment and exactly how that machine works. So we're interested in exactly where in the brain and what's the most important part of the brain. So we've been looking at this, the interaction of genes, what's called epigenetic effects, brain damage, and environment, and how these are timed. And how you end up with a psychopath and a killer depends on exactly when the damage occurs. It's really a very precisely timed thing. You get different kinds of psychopaths. So we're going along with this, and here's just to give you the pattern. And the pattern is that those people, every one of them I looked at who was a murderer and who was a serial killer, had damage to their orbital cortex, which is right above the eyes, the orbits, and also the anterior part of the temporal lobe. So there's this pattern that every one of them had, but they all were a little different too. They had other sorts of brain damage. The key thing is that the major violence genes is called the MAOA gene. And there's a variant of this gene that is in the normal population. Some of you have this. And it's sex-linked. It's on the X chromosome. And so in this way, you can only get it from your mother. And in fact, this is probably why mostly men, boys, are psychopathic killers, are very aggressive. Because, the daughter can get one X from the father, one X from the mother. It's kind of diluted out. But for a son, it could only get the X chromosome from his mother. So this is how it's passed from mother to son. And it has to do with too much serotonin during development. It's kind of interesting because serotonin is supposed to make you calm and relaxed. But if you have this gene in utero, your brain is bathed in this. So your whole brain becomes insensitive to serotonin. So it doesn't work, later on. And I had given this one talk in Israel just this past year. And it does have some consequences. And theoretically, what this means is that in order to express this gene in a violent way, very early on, before puberty, you have to be involved in something that's really traumatic. Not a little stress, not being spanked or something, but really seeing violence or being involved in it in 3D. Right? This is how the mirror neuron system works. And so if you have that gene,